Welcome to Alaska Weather, a production of Alaska Public Media and the National Weather Service, Alaska Region. Produced and broadcast daily from the studios of KAKM, Alaska Weather provides complete forecasts, public, marine, and aviation for all of Alaska. Alaska Weather is made possible by the following sponsors.
If you're interested in serving on your local Federal Subsistence Regional Advisory Council, the deadline to apply is Friday, February 3rd. Email subsistence@fws.gov for more information.
The National Weather Service.
Hello everyone, and thanks for joining us for this Monday's edition of Alaska Weather. We've got winter weather advisories out here for the central Tanana Valley on up to the northeast there for northeast winds gusting 40 miles per hour, reducing visibility to a half mile or less at times in blowing snow. And then also winter weather advisory out for the northern Bristol Bay area for 2 to 4 inches of additional snowfall, winds gusting as high as 45 miles an hour, creating similar conditions to what's going on up there with visibilities down to a half mile or less at times due to the blowing snow. And both of those out through tonight and into early tomorrow morning. Satellite imagery yesterday showed the remnants of that snow band that started Friday evening here across the Anchorage area, south central Alaska, brought all that heavy snow into Seward, on up to Moose Pass, really dissipating out, some more clouds off to the east, and enhancing areas of precipitation, especially snow up here from Yakutat in over the northern Panhandle. Then the intense storm centered out over the central Aleutians, and a very strong frontal system bringing gusty winds and blizzard conditions to the eastern Aleutians, up to the Pribilofs, and that's shifting into the Alaska Peninsula. Today, that front has pushed eastward here and weakened. Still pretty good winds, gale force and storm force winds out in advance of the front there, but areas of or precipitation mixing with rain, becoming mixed here along the Alaska Peninsula back toward the eastern Aleutians. And then the strong winds yesterday that were the strong northerlies back over the western Aleutians, shifting eastward here into the Adak area for storm warnings out today and tonight. Otherwise, clouds and another round of snow spreading back in, or had spread back in, up along the North Gulf Coast, in over the Kenai Peninsula, all the way up into the Anchorage area, with just clouds farther to the north. Arctic coast pretty fair up there, with temperatures in the mid-40s this afternoon across the area, especially around Umiat Airfield. And then the winds on the increase here over the northern Bering Sea. For today, again, still snow and blowing snow occurring there across the Pribilofs there with east-northeast winds. Conditions not quite as bad as they were yesterday. And then the northerly winds here working into the central Aleutians with gusts of 60 miles an hour. The other side of this low center, or the trough axis through here, milder conditions, southerly flow. So snow levels lifting, and rain and snow now across the peninsula with less wind conditions. And then storm force winds working up to the North Gulf Coast tonight, and actually into Prince William Sound in the forecast for tonight. And then the snow that spread northward across the Kenai Peninsula and Cook Inlet and extends back to the west in varying amounts and intensities here, depending on which side of the mountain ranges you are on, out to the southwest coast. And then this trough brought the significant snow, or the heavier snow today, to the North Gulf Coast. Next, then over to Yakutat, in across the northern Panhandle, and then changed over to rain by the time you got down to places like Klawock, Annette, and Ketchikan. And then for tonight, again, storm warnings out for tonight from the North Gulf Coast, Prince William Sound until the front pushes eastward. Then they'll diminish and drop back down. Meanwhile, gales in the forecast for the Panhandle with warmer conditions, increasing rainfall, staying in the form of snow up to the north there, Haines on up to Skagway, and then a mixture off to the east. Now some rain and snow showers, lighter winds there for the western Gulf Coast back down toward Kodiak Island, and areas of snow continue here from northern, or again, where the advisory's out from northern Bristol Bay, and areas of snow northward from there into Norton Sound, and then weakening as heads off toward the northern Koyukuk Valley and the Brooks Range. It remains dry here in the Arctic coast with winds on the light side, not too terribly strong till you get over here to these western capes and through the Chukchi Sea, a little bit more of a breeze there. And conditions improving here over the Pribilofs with the heavier snow shifting eastward and overall dissipating, and the winds coming down a little bit, still northeasterlies gusting maybe 40 miles an hour. And now windier conditions push eastward into the eastern Aleutian area, specifically around Nikolsky. Winds diminish here markedly across the central Aleutians with snow showers ending, and then just a few scattered to isolated snow showers farther off to the west. And the outlook for tomorrow, this low continues to weaken. The one that was just to the south swings northeastward and troughs out as it approaches Kodiak Island. So that'll bring another round of rain into that area from south to north throughout the day. Otherwise, southwest interior, Kuskokwim Valley, snow showers. Look for periods of snow, mainly along the eastern slopes of the western Alaska Range. And then Susitna, Matanuska Valley areas kind of into the dry slot here with a general southeast, weak southeast flow. So it looks like eastern Turnagain Arm on across Prince William Sound and the southern coast of the Kenai Peninsula will be seeing this more significant precipitation tomorrow afternoon. Rain and wind here for the southeast coast in the north, but not too bad down to the south. And then moving on to the outlook for Wednesday, that front edges eastward and weakens, but that'll bring an area of rain and snow across the Panhandle. Northward should be flat out rain from Elephant Cove to Yakutat into Cordova, and then becoming mixed or snow for the Valdez area, and then cutting off there along the coastal mountains, so not expecting much to push into the Copper River Basin, and then kind of enhancing again lighter snow as you get up on the southern slopes as you approach the Alaska Range and then back to the west. And rain and snow Kodiak, rain, as I mentioned, could be moderate at times there around Seward, and then kind of on the edge as you head up the highway there toward Moose Pass, whether it be in the form of rain or snow. A swath of snow out here over the Kilberg Mountain areas into the southern Kuskokwim Valley, break over the Yukon Delta with the front edging northward, but along in advance of the front, windier conditions with periods of snow that'll stretch all the way up to the northwest coast and actually onto the northeast there from Cape Lisburne all the way up to Barrow, maybe a Licktock. Drier to the east, pretty dry here over the interior, developing southeast flow, probably no significant precipitation at all here for the next few days north of the Alaska Range, or for that matter even in the Copper River Basin. So not too bad there with temperatures edging upwards throughout the week. And back here to the west, north winds again from the St. Lawrence Island area. Look for snow and blowing snow to be on the increase again on Wednesday back toward Teller and Wales. And some of that slipping down to the Pribilofs. We'll see in the form of snow showers there. The winds won't be as strong as they will be to the north. And then this looks like a snow shower pattern, northerlies 15 to 30 miles an hour, maybe a few higher gusts, especially here around the eastern Aleutians with this 967 millibar low just to the southeast. And that same system will bring periods of light rain up to the Alaska Peninsula areas, and then improving conditions as you head west. Temperatures across the southeast coast all in the 30s today, ranging from 30 at Skagway, Juneau at 35, Sitka 36, rain, and 37 at Klawock, and about that same temperature at Metlakatla. Lower 30s for the North Gulf Coast with 32 there at Cordova. That same temperature matched at Whittier with 19 at Kenai, 34 down at Homer, mid to upper 30s across Kodiak Island, and mostly below zero for the Copper River Basin, McCarthy up to 3, Valdez 18, 18 below zero at Northway with minus 27 at Fairbanks, minus 29 there over at Tanana. McGrath minus 20. Farther to the north, 27 below the 3 p.m. reading at Bettles. About the same over at Fort Yukon, as well as in the Brooks Range here. North of the mountains, though, clearer skies. Omiat Airfield at minus 42, minus 33 there at Atchison. And Kaktovik had 24 below. And then right around 30 below here for places like Buckland, Kotzebue, as well as Kivlena, while Shishmaref was minus 26. Minus 6 also out there at Savunga. Nome, minus 1. Minus 24 there at Caltag, and a minus 2 at Marshall. Otherwise, Amonic at 6 below. And out in the Pribilofs there at St. Paul came in with 23 degrees today. 36 there at Atka, 32 at Adak, as well as Shimia, but Nikolsky up to 40 degrees. And actually that was the only 40 ad plotted in the state today. Otherwise, upper 30s there for the peninsula, and even King Salmon popping up to 34 degrees. Lows for tonight, not dropping too much there. Upper 20s to lower 30s here, the peninsula. Again, on up into northeastern Bristol Bay. Mid to upper 20s back to the west. No change for the Pribilofs. Also, St. Lawrence Island, not much temperature change. Below zero again in the 15 to 30 below range there. Probably colder here, of course, on the north slope. And it looks like south of the Alaska Range, as well as most of the Copper River Basin, should stay this side of zero throughout the night tonight, and even into the 20s down toward the coast. 35, the forecast low for Kodiak, and in the 30s there, upper 20s to mid 30s for the Panhandle. Highs for tomorrow in the mid 40s at places like Sitka there. Otherwise, everyone else in the 30s. Coolest in the north, right around 30 for the North Gulf Coast, or into the mid 30s actually, like around Yakutat. Kodiak should push up to 40. Lower 30s, Kenai Peninsula to maybe even mid 30s there out toward the coastline. Otherwise, the Sitna Valley pushing into the upper 20s. Teens for the Copper River Basin. North of the mountains now, even warming up there, coming up, but still remain a little below zero. Coldest conditions continue on the north slope and the Arctic coast. Upper 20s, lower 30s out over the Aleutians. For flying weather, other than the area of IFR in the eastern Arctic coast, looks pretty good here through much of the interior. Then you start picking up some IFR along the western Alaska Range in a more widespread area here for the North Gulf Coast, Prince William Sound, on over into the northern Panhandle. IFR there from Togiak, or actually Dillingham, westward and then south to the eastern Aleutians, but becoming marginal there for the Pribilofs. VFR, St. Lawrence Island. Tomorrow afternoon, no change up there. Looks pretty good. St. Lawrence Island through the Bering Strait. Still some possible areas of IFR, central eastern Arctic coast, otherwise pretty good through the interior. Pick up some marginal VFR south side of the Alaska Range, IFR on the western slopes, or the eastern slopes of the western Alaska Range, and beginning to improve a little here along the North Gulf Coast with IFR. Looks like it'll stay mostly off to the west of the Panhandle, and then the Pribilofs back into the IFR. Anatuvik and Adigan, both VFR once again tomorrow as it were today. Lake Clark and Merrill, though, IFR on the eastern entrances, better conditions to the west. That same pattern also good for rainy with the lowest flying conditions here on the eastern entrance. Windy, though, VFR. And Isabel, probably IFR, and then out of the moisture field there, Montesta will be VFR. Tanita looks pretty good. And Portage, we'll see a good chance of it being IFR, especially on the eastern entrance. Chilkoot and White, IFR in the forecast. Freezing levels at the surface now, back up to the North Gulf Coast and then cutting down through the Panhandle, 2,000 feet right on its heels here, 4,000 feet off the coast. Otherwise, surface now working north of the Alaska Peninsula and over to about Atka. Icing-wise, areas of above 3,000 feet here from the Kobuk Valley on out to Selawik, southward across eastern Norton Sound, covering all of the southwest interior to Nunivak Island. And another area here along the North Gulf Coast up to the eastern Alaska Range there, and then into the northern two-thirds of the Panhandle. Jet stream well south of the Aleutians here, and takes a turn to the north up across the Gulf of Alaska at about 90 knots, pulling warmer conditions northward with it as higher pressure, as a ridge of high pressure here has developed now across the southeast coast into the Yukon. and 9,000 feet winds shaping up like this. Couple of low centers through here, so south to southeast winds off the Pacific right on up into the interior there, pushing all the way up to the Brooks Range, up to 50 to 55 knots here off the southeast coast, otherwise just 10 to 20 over the interior. And then northerly winds continue, Chuck CC across St. Lawrence Island, and then kind of diverge here across the Bering Sea and diminish, but still 30 knots for Shemya. Same pattern at 3,000 feet. 35 knots, Bering Strait, St. Lawrence Island, dropping back to 20 for the Pribilofs, northeasterlies 20 to 25. Western Aleutians, light and variable through this area, southeast 15 to 30 knots up to the North Gulf Coast. Strongest winds here right off the southeast Panhandle coastline. Turbulence-wise, occasional moderate chop here. Port Alexander on up to near Yakutat over to just about Juneau. Probably Haines will see moderate turbulence. Pretty smooth through much of interior Alaska all the way up to the Arctic coast. But with those northerly winds, occasional light to isolated moderate chop from Cape Lisburne down to St. Lawrence Island. Not too bad over the Bering Sea and the Aleutians. And after the break of Hangar Flying, I will return with a look at the ice edge and the marine forecasts.
Good evening, everybody. I'm Mary O'Connor with the Alaskan Aviation Safety Foundation and the National Institute for Occupational Safety and Health. On behalf of Alaska Public Media, thank you for watching Hangar Flying. Tonight, we have Mike Hodges from the National Transportation Safety Board as our guest. Mike's an aviation accident investigator here in Anchorage. Welcome to Hangar Flying, Mike.
Thank you, Mary.
Your latest safety alert was published last month. Congratulations.
Thank you.
The title of the safety alert is Helicopter Landing Sites Free from Debris. Can we review what is foreign object debris?
Sure. Foreign object debris are objects that are light enough to affect the helicopter, mainly the main rotor system and the tail rotor system. Objects that are light enough to migrate upwards due to the the downwash and upwash, if you will, from the helicopter.
Okay. So your safety alerts have a similar format. They list a problem and then they give examples of related accidents. And the examples in this alert are very different in many aspects. The objects ingested were a towel, a rope, some tarps, and it sounds like any size object can present a problem. What are some examples of foreign object debris that can affect helicopters?
Sure. You listed a few, tarps, ropes, tumbleweeds. There could be clothing equipment from individuals on the landing site, hats, knit caps. Could be empty shopping bags that are laying around, general trash. It's a variety of lighter objects that can be, like I said, lifted up and ingested by that main rotor system or tail rotor system.
So it doesn't have to be something heavy. Like I can imagine a tarp would be a huge hazard that a pilot might know about, but something as simple as a hat on a ground crew person could cause problems.
Definitely, if it's not secure, that definitely could cause a problem for the helicopter.
Okay. So in the examples listed in the safety alerts, the pilots don't always recognize that there are foreign objects that might be a hazard. Should helicopter pilots always be prepared for loose objects, or are there any kind of unwritten guidelines that exist for helicopter pilots?
Yeah, most definitely. Anytime you're doing any sort of landing operations, especially off airport, off helipad landings, you should definitely keep that in the back of your mind of that. Loose objects could potentially pose a hazard to the helicopter, and always keep your scan up looking for objects that are loose or could become loose, and just having that situation awareness to avoid those potentially questionable areas.
I'm not saying that it's more difficult, but certainly there are a lot more challenges for a helicopter pilot in looking at a landing zone and the hazards that might exist, as well as potential hazards that don't exist yet until they get close to landing.
Yeah, definitely. And kind of ways to help that is, when you're coming in and doing your landing and executing your high reconnaissance and your low reconnaissance, and one of the things you're looking for in addition to suitability of the landing site is also looking just to make sure, like I said, there's no loose objects or anything that could become loose and affect the helicopter.
Okay. The missions of the examples that were listed in the safety alert were all very different as well. One was a high altitude rescue, one was a training, and one was picking up and moving trash. The other was just landing. Are there any types of operations that are particularly hazardous or more inherently dangerous than any other?
I think you kind of spelled it out right there, where it's kind of all across the spectrum where this issue could affect you, whether, like you said, you're doing helicopter, air ambulance operations, a search and rescue mission, just general flight training, any sort of profile it could be prone to.
And a landing zone that a pilot hasn't been to before may be particularly hazardous, especially if it's dark?
Yes, most definitely. Visibility can definitely play a role with you being able to search and scan, and of course weather conditions too. With rain, water can also migrate objects down to the landing site, and of course wind, as we all know, plays a role with the movement of objects to a landing site.
In one of the examples, one of the pilots, he knew that the tarp might come loose, so he hovered the helicopter about 10 feet above the landing area just to see if the tarp would come loose, and it didn't, so he continued to land. Is there anything that pilots can do to control foreign object debris?
One of the biggest things, if you're coming into a landing site, you're not sure, is don't land there. Also, if there's folks on the ground that you have communication with, of course, have them sweep the landing site, have them secure any loose items or remove any loose items. But like I said, just if you're not sure, don't land there. Work with folks on the ground to help secure those items.
And in closing here, where can we find information about this safety alert as well as other safety alerts?
Sure. If you go to the NTSB's website at www.ntsb.gov, we have a large section in there of safety alerts and safety studies and safety recommendations where you can see this safety alert and a variety of others. And of course, we're also on social media, on Facebook and YouTube also, so you can go and see the various social media outreach projects that we do.
Very good. Thank you so much for being here, Mike. We really appreciate you taking time out of your day, and I know you're on call, so I hope it stays quiet for you this week.
Me too. Thank you very much for having me. I appreciate it.
Thanks, Mike. Ladies and gentlemen, we hope that you've enjoyed hangar flying, and we hope that you'll join us next time when we talk to Mike Hodges again about some more information on how to prevent foreign object debris from causing helicopter crashes. Until next time, fly safely.
Welcome back. Today's sea ice analysis. Over the last 10 days, quite a big increase here from the Bering Strait on down across St. Lawrence Island, as well as the southwest coast. And over the next few days, it's going to continue to expand westward and southward. But from roughly Kuskokwim Bay on into Bristol Bay, conditions are already a lot less conducive to any additional sea ice expansion. So for the marine forecast here for the Panhandle, gale warnings, mostly southeast winds 35 to 40 knots tomorrow. Small craft advisory central and southern inside waters, south 30 for northern Lynn Canal. On the next day, lighter winds now down to 20 knots from the south here for the south coast. Small craft advisories on the north coast at 25 knots. And then southeast 20, northern Lynn Canal, pick up to 25 knots here, Stevens Passage. Gales out, minimum gales there for Clarence Strait. And for Prince William Sound, east 20 tomorrow, southeasterly small craft advisory type winds here for the North Gulf Coast, as well as the Barrens down across Kodiak Island. East 25, Kamishak Bay, northeast 15 to 20 for Cook Inlet. Wednesday's forecast, 30 knots for Kamishak Bay, small craft advisory Shelikof Strait. And southeasterlies, 30 to 35, Kodiak to the Barrens, southeasterly gales to the North Gulf Coast. Southeast 25 for Prince William Sound. Bristol Bay, east 20 knots, southeasterlies 15 to 20, blow across the Alaska Peninsula, and then pick up to 25 knots here, Castle Cape to Sitkinak. And then the next day, no change except the seas come down here from Sitkinak to Castle Cape, east 20 on the south side of the peninsula, northeast at the same speed in the Bering Sea side, and small craft or brisk wind advisories for Bristol Bay. And for the Fox Islands, northwest to west here, 20 knots, lighter to the west in Nikolsky. Northerlies down to 10 or 15 to 20 for the central Aleutians, and then picking back up to 25 knots toward Shimia. Then those become northerly. Now you've got 25 knot winds here as you approach the central Aleutians, where they become northwesterly and extend all the way across the Fox Islands with 8 to 12-foot seas there, otherwise running about 10 to 14 everywhere else. For the southwest coast, east 20 out of Kuskokwim Bay, south of Nunivak Island to the north, northeast 25, so brisk wind advisories there up across St. Lawrence Island. Northerlies at 30 knots from the northern Bering Sea, dropping back to 20 down across the Pribilofs. For Wednesday, north 30 knots, St. Lawrence Island from the Bering Strait into the northern Bering Sea, but lighter winds now here all along the southwest coast, out of the east at about 20, northwest 20 there for St. Paul and St. George. Eastern Arctic coast or eastern Beaufort Sea coastline here, easterlies 20 to 25 knots, strongest toward demarcation point, down to 15 on the central coast and northeast here, kicking up to 30 knots from Cape Beaufort, and then north 25 down to the Bering Strait. For the next day, brisk wind advisories continue through these areas, but drop back to 15 knots on the west coast, northeast 10, become easterly at 10, so pretty light winds there for the eastern coastline Wednesday. And for tonight, again, front moves northward, so periods of snow, especially this evening, becoming more intermittent as we head toward morning here, especially on the lee side of the mountains, specifically from Anchor Point on up to Palmer, with the more significant stuff now kind of shifting back toward the Alaska Range. Swath of snow out here to the west from the northern Bristol Bay area where there's snow or winter weather advisories due to blowing snow out tonight with 2 to 4 more inches. And then this snow kind of tapers off and narrows out as it heads up toward the Brooks Range. Gale force winds actually tonight early, storm warnings for the North Gulf Coast tonight into Prince William Sound until late tonight as the front pushes through. And then looking ahead to tomorrow, that front edges eastward a little bit there, spreading some rain into the northern southeast coast. Less precipitation here over south central Alaska. Even this area back to the west starts to narrow out. And then for the next day, snow and blowing snow pick up again for St. Lawrence Island and rain for the North Gulf Coast.
These forecasts are to be used for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating. Alaska Weather is made possible by the following sponsors.
The National Weather Service.
If you're interested in serving on your local Federal Subsistence Regional Advisory Council, the deadline to apply is Friday, February 3rd. Call 1-800-478-1456 for more information.